projecting that by the end of the week or by next week, our reproduction number will be less than 1. That means we will be possibly on a downward trend already. Fortunately, Rita, it will take some time before we get to those numbers. Even when we get to a downward trend, starting from 10,000 cases, it will take us at least maybe 2 or 3 months to get to 1,000 to 2,000 cases like what we were seeing before.
That was Okta Research Fellow Guido David saying COVID-19 reproduction number might go down below 1 before the week is over.
That may signify a downtrend in cases, but the team says it might take as long as 3 months before cases go down to levels seen before the current surge. Good evening, I'm Gretchen Ho.
And I'm Robbie Alampay. You're watching The Big Story. We begin tonight with Okta Research predicting that the COVID-19 reproduction rate in the country could dip to 1 as early as this weekend. But the group is warning the fight is far from over.
Okta says it could still take the country up to 3 months to bring down the number of daily cases to around 1,000. Jess De Los Santos with The Big Story.
Over the past weeks, it has been normal for the country to log more than 10,000 cases daily. But while the surge still holds true, the Okta Research Group is seeing an encouraging sign. The reproduction number is dipping closer to 1.
It was 1.88 before the ECQ, and as of yesterday, it's 1.23. This is a significant decrease, and that's pushing the momentum of the virus down.
The reproduction number, or R0, pertains to the number of people that one infected individual can transmit the virus to. Ideally, it should be below 1. Professor Guido David sees that dropping to 1 by the end of the week or next week. But he says this does not mean a downward trend.
This does not guarantee that it's on a downward trend because it just means that the numbers this week are lower compared to last week.
For David, it might take at least 2 to 3 months to bring down the average daily cases to 1,000. But they might have to do some recalibrating, given the revert to MECQ in NCR+.
And it's actually a lot less restrictive than we expected. And we are in the process of calibrating our recommendations regarding the MECQ.
As the surge is still real, the Healthcare Professionals Alliance Against COVID-19 released a 5-point recommendation to address the worsening situation. The group tells Wagpo that it includes the establishment of a one-incident management team in the bubble, especially with the one hospital command already overwhelmed.
Pag bumubuhos kayo ng tubig, yung umaapaw, yun na lang sana ang pupunta sa one hospital command.
Saan mo isasalin?
Kasi doon mo siya isasalin kasi punong-puno ka na.
Other recommendations include a law for ICT integration and data sharing for immediate infection detection. Apat dapat, and strong ventilation measures must also be strictly implemented. The vaccination program must also be recalibrated to ramp up inoculation. And the government should allocate more social safety nets for Filipinos during the crisis. Jess De Los Santos, we are One News.
Is the Health Department seeing the same trends? To let us know their take, we talk via phone to Health Undersecretary Leopoldo Vega. Secretary Vega, welcome to The Big Story.
Good evening, Robin, and to all the listeners out there.
Yusek, we're taking note of these, hopefully optimistic projections from Okta Research, but we're also taking note of this at the time that mag-uumpisa pa lang tayo sa MECQ. Are you seeing the same trend, and will this trend hold even under MECQ?
I think for the last 2 weeks, we have been able to control the mobility of people interacting around. And we know that there has been a slight progression in terms of making sure that the minimum health standards are there. And not only that, we have seen that the suppression of the virus has been very significant. In fact, in Okta Research, they were able to find out that the R0 has significantly decreased. So with the continuous application of the minimum health standards, and of course the making sure that testing is there. In fact, we are now rolling out the testing for, especially in these highly prevalent areas with the antigen. Then we will be able to make sure that we can isolate the significantly the positive people and contact trace those who have been in contact with them. So if we are able to maximize contact tracing, testing, and of course isolation, then the suppression of the virus can happen, meaning to say suppression of the transmission, and the probability that the R naught will be below 1 is there. As long as we have these initiatives, all of us will have the initiatives of really suppressing the virus.
Okay, now Yusek Vega, on the other side of this, as people have been reporting, bumababa yung R naught, but sa fatality rate sa COVID-19 cases, medyo tumaas ng konti by about 0.2%. Now, experts are saying that could be attributed to either of two things or both. It could be variants, although they're saying there's not enough data on that. The other thing is they're saying stretched ang ating public health system, obviously, and that might be leading to a slight uptick in fatality rates. Are we ready is the public health system also improving its capacity again so that we can continue this trend of bringing down fatality rates as well?
Yeah, I think so. I think we have been looking at the mortality rate as significantly in the below 2%. In other words, this is roughly between 1.7 and 1.8. And definitely comparing it with last year, there is a bit of an uptick. But it means only that the uptick could only be that this could be possibly be involving a lot of elderly people who have been contracting the virus. And second, I don't think it is really that significant in terms of the mortality, since we have, I know the healthcare workers have already experienced and they already know how to treat the COVID pandemic in terms of critical and severe patients, and basically the clinical guidelines are there, and I think looking at it from this perspective, I think we have experience in terms of treating the virus, and secondly, I think the mortality has been definitely been on a fixed in a fixed rate compared with last year.
Okay, salamat Yusek. That was Health Undersecretary Leopoldo Vega. New COVID-19 cases are falling below record highs, but there might be a reason for that. Tonight's big number is 8,571. That is the number of infections logged over the past 24 hours. That's the lowest in the past 5 days. This brings total caseload to more than 884,000. But the low number of cases comes as only 27,900 were tested for the virus. The country had been averaging around 45,000 tests per day.
These are the other big stories tonight. The World Health Organization cautions against comparing vaccine brands after a Chinese health official conceded that the country's jabs have lower efficacy than other shots. Quarantine in the NCR Plus bubble has already been eased to MECQ, but only 8% of aid for ECQ has been distributed, covering less than 2 million of close to 23 million beneficiaries. And the Foreign Affairs Department summons China's envoy over the continuing presence of Chinese vessels in the Julian Felipe Reef. These big stories after the break.
Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay. More than 700,000 Filipinos have already been vaccinated with Sinovac shots, but with a Chinese health official conceding that their vaccines have low efficacy, should those who receive the jab be concerned? Greg Gregorio with this story.
Dozens of nations depend on China's vaccines to rescue them from the COVID-19 pandemic. But that just hit a big question mark. The head of the Chinese Center for Disease Control and Prevention admitted that the country's vaccines have lower efficacy compared to other shots, even suggesting mixing it with other vaccines to boost efficacy. But the World Health Organization cautions against comparing vaccine brands, especially with Sinovac's efficacy well within threshold at 50%.
And in this phase where we're really focusing on reducing hospitalizations and deaths and serious disease, it really is the performance against the serious end of the spectrum of disease that is most critical.
The WHO is evaluating Sinovac and Sinopharm's COVID-19 vaccine for its emergency use listing. In the Philippines, only Sinovac has secured emergency use authorization and has recently been approved for use on senior citizens. Vaccine expert panel head Dr. Nina Gloriani said comparing vaccine efficacy among brands is like comparing apples to oranges, with shots differing in platform and trial setting.
Yung efficacy ng Sinovac na 50.6%. Dami yan doon sa 100% healthcare workers na kanilang subjects sa clinical trial. So at a time when the cases of COVID sa kanila ay napakataas.
The panel is already looking into the possibility of mixing different COVID-19 jabs to boost low efficacy and to address low supply of vaccines. But infectious disease expert Ron Jean Solante tells Agenda this needs more data.
Hindi lang porke na ito, bigay ko to, diretso. You need to do some studies on that dahil hindi natin alam pag iba mo yung isang platform, how will it affect the antibody response.
As for those already vaccinated with Sinovac jabs, Solante said there's nothing to fear.
We have to be logical in our interpretation of ano tong mga sinasabi sa ibang bansa, no? Because at this point yung momentum dapat natin ang isipin na makapagbakuna at maraming mabakunahan with Sinovac.
For News 5, Greg Gregorio, we are One News.
Sinovac shots will meanwhile undergo clinical trials for senior citizens in the Philippines starting next month. During the DOH Kapihan, vaccine expert panel head Dr. Nina Gloriani said there will be 2,000 participants. It will run for a year. Gloriani explained that Sinovac has been allowed for use on the elderly since it shows no severe infections in trials in Brazil. The panel stands by Sinovac's general efficacy.
Time for our next look at some of today's big stories. A social weather station survey found that 65% of Filipinos believe that the president's state of health is a public matter. Only 32% believe it should not be disclosed to the public. After canceling his weekly address last week, President Duterte appeared on televised briefing last night. He denied having health conditions that would prevent him from fulfilling his duties. Only 8% of the total 22.9 billion peso ECQ ayuda has been disbursed so far, according to the Social Welfare Department. This means that nationwide, 1.75 billion pesos of cash aid have been distributed as of April 11. Secretary Rolando Bautista admitted that they were off to a slow start, but that distribution should accelerate soon. Former President Joseph Erap Estrada has tested negative for COVID-19. His son, Jinggoy Estrada, said that his father's health condition continues to improve. He still requires high-flow oxygenation, but at a much reduced rate. Erap is expected to be transferred to a regular room soon. And a delivery rider from Manila goes viral for his ingenious mode of transportation, rollerblades. Many netizens are inspired with his humility and grit. A look at the story of this awe-inspiring delivery guy in action in my report.
Nakikita mo yun. Yung i-deliver ko, nakita mo na. Maandar pa.
Even beyond 8 o'clock, Ronnie is out in the streets of Quiapo, Manila to deliver this electric fan. His means of transportation? Well, it's not a bike, not a motorcycle either, but rollerblades. Ronnie said he picked it up from his childhood hobby.
Ngayon, yung nagkaroon po ng pandemic, wala po akong maisip na diskarte. Ngayon, sinubukan ko po mag-rollerblade. Ayun, hanggang saan po natuto po ako mag-deliver. Sa kang lugar.
Ronnie went viral last week with a shtick, which he aptly calls roller moves. Aside from delivery, Ronnie also offers pasabay. He purchases a customer's needs in exchange for a modest fee.
Pino-contact po ako sa FB, gano'n. Order muna po ako, tapos ngayon pag-order ko, abunawan ko po, pagbalik dito, yun, hanggang sa binabayaran ko po. Binabayaran po nila ako ng 30, 40, minsan dinadagdagan din po.
Ronnie fulfills 7 to 10 orders daily with his roller moves. Like many others, he lost his job due to the pandemic. He used to drive a sidecar to put food on the table and to provide milk and diapers for his newborn. He is now a barangay official on the side, but his stipend doesn't suffice.
Alternate po kasi yung pagiging pasok ko po sa barangay. Kataon pong pag wala pong pasok sa barangay. Ito po, yan, ginagawa ko po, mag-deliver.
His humility and grit to carry on was well received by netizens and even caught the attention of the initiative Donate a Bike, Save a Job. It gave him grocery items and upgraded his delivery service.
Salamat po ko. Binibigay niyo pong tulong. Sana po meron po kayong ibigay niyo pong tulong sa iba tao. Grabe po yung binigay niyo. Salamat po talaga.
Donate a Bike, Save a Job hopes Ronnie can accept more deliveries, earn more, and travel farther and safer. Gretchen Hall, we are One News. Time for another quick break. When we return, for the first time since he sat as China's envoy to the Philippines, Ambassador Wang Xilian has been summoned by the DFA over the presence of Chinese vessels in the Julian Felipe Reef. Inoculation in Pasig City might be going smoothly, and some residents are too eager to send Mayor Vico Soto some unwarranted proof of their vaccination, to the young mayor's surprise. The details after the break.
Good evening, I'm Robbie Alampay. You're still watching The Big Story. The Foreign Affairs Department has summoned China's envoy to explain the lingering presence of its fishing and militia vessels in the Julian Felipe Reef. To give us more details on this, we have One News Defense Editor, Manny Mugato. Good evening, Manny.
Good evening, Robbie.
Manny, is there precedent for this under the Duterte administration?
No, this is the first time that a Chinese ambassador was summoned by DFA in the 5 years of Rodrigo Duterte in Malacanang. So this is really very important.
Okay,
It is a kind of protest, but with more intensity and seriousness in it. So it's an escalation of our diplomatic protest from last month.
Yes, but when you say that it's an escalation, certainly this is the strongest, one of the strongest messages the administration has sent with regards to the disputed waters and certainly REEZ. But does it move the needle? Does it make any difference?
Yes, it is, because if you summon an ambassador, it means you really mean business. It's a kind of a protest that has more seriousness than a note verbal sent last month by Secretary Locsin.
Okay. Does it mean anything for our bilateral ties?
No, because the South China Sea is just one aspect of our bilateral relation with China, which includes economic, investments, and people-to-people relations. So it's just one aspect. But it is very important because it is one of the irritants in the bilateral relation between the two countries.
Okay, maraming salamat. That was One News Defense Editor Manny Bugato.
Let's take a look at the biggest stories on print and online. From the Philippine Star, Senators Franklin Drilon, Cynthia Villar, and Kiko Pangilinan will file a joint resolution to revoke EO 128. The order lowers tariffs on imported meat and increase minimum allowable pork imports. Under the Tariffs and Customs Code of the Philippines, a presidential order that tinkers with levies may be withdrawn or terminated through a joint resolution from Congress. From Business World, infrastructure spending in the country picks up steam. That jumped 23.1% in February from a year ago, also ending a 6-month decline. The Budget Department attributes it to projects under the Bayanihan 2 gaining traction. From News 5, Muslim communities still adhere to health protocols as they mark the start of Ramadan. At a mosque in Barangay Culiat, Quezon City, only 10 persons within the allowed age requirement by the IATF were allowed entry. This is the second Ramadan observance amid the COVID-19 pandemic.
And here are the other big stories from around the world. Over in the United States, protests in Minnesota have intensified after a 20-year-old black man was shot dead by a police officer. Fatal shooting resulted from the officer mistakenly opening fire with her handgun instead of a taser during a struggle. Hundreds of protesters defied curfew and clashed with police in riot gear outside police headquarters in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota. Unrest also sparked between police and protesters in Portland. The killing of Daunte Wright took place 10 miles from the courthouse, where a former police officer is standing trial for the death of George Floyd.
For the big story in sports, PBA Chairman Ricky Vargas pushes for a friendly exhibition match between the PBA's best players and the Chinese national team to usher in the league's 46th season. Vargas wants the selection to be named PBA Warriors, to be led by Coach Yeng Giao. SBP Chairman Manny Pangilinan and PBA Commissioner Willie Marshall welcomed the proposal for a game between the two nations. This comes as tensions rise in the West Philippine Sea amid the increased presence of Chinese vessels in the area.
K-pop domination is real. Blackpink's Rosé just snagged 2 Guinness World Records. Her On the Ground was the most viewed YouTube music video in 24 hours by a solo K-pop artist. Its 41.6 million views broke K-pop giant-sized record, 36 million for Gangnam Style. The song also made Rosé top the Billboard Global Chart. She had achieved the same feat as Blackpink member with Lovesick Girls. This made Rosé the first artist ever to top the Billboard Global as a soloist and as a part of the group. Global sensation BTS meanwhile reached 1 billion views for the music video of Dynamite. They pulled it off in a record 7 months and 22 days. Dynamite also recently eclipsed the 32-week record of Psy's Gentleman on the Billboard Hot 100. For News 5, MJ Marfori, we are One News.
Pasig's COVID inoculation drive appears to be running smoothly, but there's one major concern. On Facebook Live, Pasig Mayor Vico Soto was all praises for his constituents who got vaccinated after they sent him photos of proof. But some just shared too much information, with some constituents unable to take jabs in the arms. Some had to resort to injections in their behind. And as they say in social media, pics or it did not happen. And so, they willingly sent the mayor some photos. Sabi nga ni Mayor, happy na siya na nakikita niya. Pero, ang dami-dami niyang araw iniisip. Huwag na idagdag yun.
May proof ano naman yun, di ba? Pero good news pa rin yun.
Good news yun.
Oo,
Pero naiintindihan ko si
marami
Mayor, baka
nagpapaturo.
ibang picture ang gustong makita ni Mayor.
Yung sa braso.
No, kung ano man.
Oh, diba?
Anything that will make him happier, the
But,
days
you know,
lighter.
that was a welcome break. All the bad news on the internet, di ba? Di ba?
Okay.
And that wraps up today's big story. Catch it again tomorrow at 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250.
Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. Mask on.
Wash hands.
And stay safe, Philippines. I'm Robbie Alampay.
I'm Gretchen Ho, and we are One News. Have a good evening.